My son signed me into the Cedar Vale care home on a Tuesday in March, kissed my cheek in the lobby, and told me it was only temporary. By Friday, he had a real estate sign in the yard of the house I had paid for. His name is Marcus. He is 41 years old, and for most of those years I believed he was a good man, because I was the one who had taught him to be one, and a mother does not like to grade her own work too harshly. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I am 68 years old. I raised that boy mostly alone in a brick house on Lattimore Street, in a city I will not name to protect the people who did right by me. And I want you to understand something before I go on, because the rest of it is going to make you angry. And I do not want your anger to run ahead of the facts. Marcus thought he was taking my house. He had a buyer half lined up before the wheels of his car left my driveway. He had spoken to a lawyer, a young one, the kind who charges by the quarter hour and never asks the question that matters. He had a plan, and the plan was clean, and the plan had exactly one flaw in it. And the flaw was this: my son had never once, in 41 years, looked at the deed. He had never seen whose name was actually on it. Before I tell you what happened next, I would love to hear from you. Have you ever been counted out by someone you raised, someone you would have given your last breath for, only to find they had already measured you for the door? Tell me in the comments. Then stay with me, because I promise you this story does not end where Marcus thought it would. Let me take you back to that Tuesday. He came to the house at 9 in the morning, which I should have known was a sign, because Marcus did not get out of bed at 9 in the morning unless there was money in it. He had on the gray suit, the one he wore to close deals, and he had brought his wife, Tanya, who stood by the door with her coat still on, like she did not plan to stay long enough to dirty a chair. There was a third person, too. A woman with a clipboard and a soft, professional voice, and I did not understand at first who she was. I offered her coffee. She said, "No, thank you, Mrs. Whitfield," in the tone people use on the very old and the very sick. And that was the first cold thing I felt that morning. That tone, before I even knew what it meant. "Mom," Marcus said, sitting across from me at my own kitchen table, "we need to talk about your living situation." I had been managing my living situation for 68 years. I had managed it through the death of his father. I had managed it through 2 recessions, a leaking roof, a furnace that quit in January, and a stretch in the early years when I worked 3 jobs and still made his lunch every single morning so he would never once go to school hungry. But I folded my hands on the table and I said, "All right, let's talk." "You had a fall," he said. "I slipped on the ice on the back step," I said. "In February. I did not break anything. The doctor said I was fine." "You could have broken a hip." "I could be struck by lightning, Marcus. I am not." Tanya made a small sound by the door, a kind of laugh that was not a laugh. The woman with the clipboard wrote something down. "Mom, you're alone in this big house," Marcus said. And he leaned forward, and he put on the face I had seen him use on clients, the warm and reasonable face, the one that said, "Trust me. I have already decided this for your own good. It isn't safe. Tanya and I have been talking, and there's a place, Cedar Vale. It's beautiful, honestly. It's nicer than a hotel. Assisted living. They have a garden. They have activities. You'd have people your own age around you. You wouldn't have to worry about the stairs, the bills, the upkeep. We'd handle all of that. You'd handle the house," I said. "We'd manage things," he said, and he smiled. "So you don't have to." I wish I could tell you I saw the whole of it in that moment. I did not. I was not God in that kitchen. Only a mother looking at a son's smile and feeling the floor tilt under me very slightly, the way it does when someone you love says a kind word in a cruel shape, and you cannot yet prove which one it is. Cedar Vale is expensive, I said. I looked at it once years ago for your grandmother. It was $4,000 a month then. Don't worry about the money, Marcus said. And there it was, the first nail. Don't worry about the money. Because the money, you see, was the whole point. And the fastest way to keep a person from looking at the money is to tell her not to worry about it. I want to slow down right here at my own kitchen table because everything in this story turns on the next 10 minutes, and I have replayed them more times than I can count. Marcus, I said, where exactly is Cedar Vale getting paid from? He blinked. He had not expected me to ask a direct question about cash flow. People do not with me. They expect the soft, confused voice, and most of the time I let them have it, because a quiet woman hears more than a loud one. But I let a little iron into it that morning, just for a second, to see what he would do. From your accounts, Mom, he said, recovering, smiling. We'll set up an automatic draft. You've got the pension, the Social Security, the savings. It'll be tight, I won't lie. That's part of why we'd want to put the house to work. Get it earning. Get it earning, I repeated. Rent, or, eventually, if it makes sense, we could look at other options. Ron Castellano, you remember Ron, he does property. He says brick on a corner lot like ours moves fast. He had a name already. Ron. He said it without thinking, the way a man lets slip the thing he has been rehearsing. And I filed it away the way I file away a vendor invoice that does not match the goods, quietly, in the back, for later. Our lot. He said our lot. The house I had paid off the year his father died, and he said ours, and he meant his. Marcus, said Tanya from the door, in the bright voice of a woman who wants a thing to be over. The coordinator has another appointment at 11. She had not taken off her coat. She did not want to be in that kitchen 1 minute longer than the transaction required. And I understood, watching her glance at her watch, that to Tanya I was not a person at all. I was a closing, a line item between here and the house. The intake coordinator, the woman with the clipboard whose name I would later learn was Brenda, cleared her throat gently. Mrs. Whitfield, I know this is a lot all at once. We try to make the transition as smooth as possible. Cedar Vale really is a wonderful community. I'm sure it is, I said. And I looked at my son, and I made the decision that built everything that followed. I decided not to fight at the table. I decided to go. Because I knew the way you know your own kitchen in the dark, that if I dug in my heels in that moment, Marcus would say I was confused, agitated, a danger to myself. And he would have the medical power of attorney out and a doctor on the phone by lunch. And I would lose the one thing I could not afford to lose, which was the appearance of being a sweet old woman who had peaceably agreed. So I folded my hands, and I said, all right, Marcus, if you think it's best. And the relief on my son's face, Lord, the relief. He had braced for a fight and gotten surrender. And he did not for 1 second wonder why a woman who had just asked exactly where Cedar Vale was getting paid from would fold so fast. He took the surrender and he ran with it. Because a man who is certain he has the upper hand does not look down to check the floor. The woman with the clipboard was an intake coordinator from Cedar Vale. They had already done the paperwork. Marcus had power of attorney for health care. I had signed it 3 years before, after a bad bout of pneumonia. I remember the afternoon. He sat at this same table with the form and a pen, and his eyes were wet. Mom, it's nothing. It's just a precaution, he said. If something happened to you, If you were in a hospital and couldn't speak for yourself, I just need to be able to help. What kind of son would I be if I couldn't help my own mother? Help how exactly? I asked, because even then some part of me read forms before I signed them. Talk to your doctors, that's all. Make sure they're treating you right. He put his hand over mine. I'm not trying to take anything, Mom. I'd never. I just love you. So I signed it, because I loved him, because the form looked harmless, because the truth is that we sign the things the people we love put in front of us. That is not weakness. That is what love costs. But I had not understood that a healthcare power of attorney in the right young lawyer's hands could be stretched and bent and pointed at a woman who slipped once on the ice. By noon, I had a suitcase packed. Not by me. By Tanya, who went through my closet with the brisk efficiency of a woman clearing out a stranger's locker. She held up my emerald green silk blouse between two fingers. Do they even need nice clothes there? That one was a gift, I said. From David. She folded it into the case anyway, badly because it was easier than answering me, and she did not ask who David was, because she knew, and because to Tanya, a dead man's gift was just one more thing to be boxed and stored. I walked out of my own front door on that Tuesday in March with one suitcase and my pocketbook, and I turned around on the front walk to look at the house. Red brick, white trim my late husband had painted the summer before he died. The maple I had planted the year Marcus was born, 41 rings thick now and bare against a gray sky. I had carried that boy up those front steps wrapped in a hospital blanket. I had buried his father from that front parlor. Every dollar that house was worth, I had earned it, a nickel and a dime at a time. And I stood on the walk, and I felt the cold March wind go straight through my coat. And Marcus put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's only temporary, Mom." Write that phrase down. He said it twice that day and 4 more times that week, and every time he said it, it was a lie, and every time he said it, some part of me that had carried him for 41 years chose, for 1 more hour, to believe him. Because that is the last cruelty of it. They do not just take the thing, they make you help. Now here is what Marcus did not know, and I am going to tell you now plainly, the way the will would tell it later, in a room full of people who thought they understood my family and did not. That house on Lattimore Street had never, not for 1 single day, been in my late husband's name. It had never been in any name a county clerk would have expected. The deed to that house, the house Marcus was at that very moment arranging to sell, did not belong to Eleanor Whitfield the way my son assumed it did. It belonged to a trust I had created 11 years before and quietly funded out of a fortune I had been building, dollar by dollar, for far longer. A trust whose sole trustee, the only living person with the legal authority to sell, mortgage, or transfer 1 square inch of that property, was a woman my son had spent his whole adult life looking down on, a woman whose name was on that deed in black ink, a woman Marcus had personally helped me push out of this family 11 years ago. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me earn that for you, the way I earned the house. Let me tell you about the money my son thought I knew nothing about. Cedar Vale was, I will admit, a beautiful building. They were not lying about that. There was a garden, and the garden had a fountain, and the carpets were thick, and the staff were kind in the way of people who are paid to be kind and have, mostly, the grace to mean it anyway. My room was on the 2nd floor, with a window that looked over the parking lot. And on my first night there, I sat on the edge of a bed that was not my bed, in a room that smelled of lavender cleaner and other people's sorrow. I unpacked the suitcase Tanya had packed, because I could not bear to leave it sitting there like a thing waiting to leave. And as I took the clothes out one by one and laid them in unfamiliar drawers, I came to the emerald green silk blouse, the one she had held up in my own closet, and said, "Do they even need nice clothes there?" It was folded badly, carelessly, creased across the front where she had jammed it down to close the case. I held that blouse in my lap for a while. David had bought it for me, years ago, for an anniversary, the one nice impulsive thing he ever did with money. And Tanya had crushed it into a suitcase like a rag because she could not imagine I would have anywhere to wear it again. Remember that blouse? I wore it out of Cedar Vale 6 weeks later, pressed and perfect, into the room where everything changed. And Tanya was wrong about that, the way she was wrong about all of it. I did not cry that first night. I want you to know that. I had cried enough in my life to know it was a tool, not a feeling, and I did not have any use for it just then. What I did instead was think. I thought about money. I have always thought about money, my whole life, and the reason I am alive and dignified at 68 and not destitute is that I never once let a man, including the one I married and the one I birthed, tell me not to worry about it. My late husband was named David Whitfield. I loved him. He was a good man in most of the ways that count, and a foolish one in exactly one, which is that he believed money was a thing that happened to you rather than a thing you built, board by board, in the dark, while everyone else was sleeping. David drove a delivery truck for a beverage distributor for 31 years. He brought home a steady check and not one dime more, and he was content. And his contentment was a beautiful thing to live beside, and a dangerous thing to retire on. I was the one who worried about the money. I cleaned houses when Marcus was small. Then I got my certificate, and I did the books for a dry cleaning chain, 4 locations, and then 6. And then I was the one the owner called when a register came up short or a vendor's invoice did not match the goods. I have a head for numbers. I always have. Numbers do not lie to you, and they do not leave, and they do not put you in a home. And from the time I was a young woman, I trusted them more than I trusted almost anyone. And the numbers have never once let me down. Let me tell you about the cleaning years, because they are the foundation under the foundation. And Marcus never once asked me about them. When Marcus was a baby and Vanessa was 4, I cleaned houses across town in the neighborhood where the lawns had sprinkler systems and the kitchens had 2 ovens. I rode 2 buses each way. I scrubbed other women's floors on my knees, and I learned things on those knees that no one ever taught me in any school. I learned that the people in those big houses were not smarter than me. Some of them could not balance a checkbook to save their lives. I once found 3 months of unopened bank statements in a drawer in a house where the woman complained she could never seem to get ahead. And I understood, kneeling there with my bucket, that the difference between her drawer and my coffee can was not money. It was attention. She had a great deal of money and paid it no attention. I had almost none, and I watched it like a hawk watches a field. I made a vow on one of those floors. I remember the floor, green linoleum, in a kitchen on Hawthorne Drive. And I remember being 29 years old with a sponge in my hand. And I made myself a promise. I promised that I would never, as long as I lived, be a woman who did not know exactly where her money was. I did not promise to be rich. I did not know how to be rich. I promised to pay attention. And that vow, made on a stranger's green linoleum floor in 1987, is the true beginning of the $2 million my son thought did not exist. In the year 1988, when Marcus was 3 years old, I took $400. Money I had saved a few dollars at a time, hidden in a coffee can the way my own mother had. And I did not buy a sofa with it. though we needed a sofa. I opened a brokerage account. The afternoon I opened it, I was terrified. This was never about being fearless. It was about being afraid and doing the thing anyway. I put on my church dress. I took the bus downtown to a brokerage office with marble floors and men in suits who did not expect a young black woman in a church dress to walk in holding $400 she had counted out of a coffee can. There was a young broker named Mr. Halloran who took pity on me. Or maybe just took the account because $400 was $400. And he sat me down at a desk that was bigger than my kitchen table. "And what brings you in today, Mrs. Whitfield?" he said, the way you talk to someone you expect to leave quickly. "I have $400, I said, and I set the envelope on the desk between us. "I would like to put it where it grows." He counted it without seeming to count it, the way they do. "That's a fine start. And what were you thinking of investing in? Do you follow the market at all?" "I don't follow it," I said. "I clean houses. But I know what people buy when they have money and what they buy when they don't. Because I've been in both kinds of kitchen. So I want to own pieces of companies that make the things people buy either way. Soap, food, medicine." I folded my hands. "And I never want to sell. Not for anything. Not ever. Can you do that?" He looked at me for a long moment, and something in his face shifted, the look of a man who has just decided to stop talking down to you. "Most people," he said slowly, "tell me they want to get rich. You're telling me you want to never be poor. Those are not the same instruction." "No," I said, "they are not." He picked up his pen and wrote down 3 companies. Blue chip names you would know. "If you really never sell," he said, sliding the paper across, "and you keep adding whatever you can, a little every month, Mrs. Whitfield, you are going to be all right, better than all right, if you've got the stomach for it." "I've got the stomach," I said. I had been on my knees on other women's floors for years already. My stomach was the one thing I was sure of. I held those 3 companies for 37 years. I added to them every month I could. 2 of the 3 split their shares so many times over the decades that the $400 became a thing Mr. Halloran himself would not have believed. David did not know. That is the engine of everything that came after, and I am not proud of the secret, only clear-eyed about what it built. David did not believe in the stock market. He had grown up hearing about 1929, about men jumping out of windows, and to him the market was a casino that ate working people. So I did not argue with him. I did not try to change his mind. I simply took $400 he did not know we had, and I put it where it could grow, and I told no one. We almost fought about it once. Only once. It was the year the furnace died, in the dead of winter, and David came to me at the kitchen table where I was doing the household books. And he stood there, turning his cap in his hands the way he did when the news was bad. "Eleanor," he said, "the furnace man was back out. It's not a part this time. It's the whole unit. He wants $1,200. "And we have $800 in the account," I said. I did not look up from the ledger. I knew the number to the dollar. "We have $800 in the account." He sat down across from me. "So, where are we going to find the other 4? And I had it. That is the thing you have to understand. I had it sitting in the brokerage that very afternoon, $400 and a great deal more. I could have written the check before the man's truck left the curb. And I looked at my husband, who I loved, who was cold and worried and asking me an honest question, and I made the hardest choice of those years, which was to keep the secret even then. "I'll take in extra work," I said, "Saturdays, and we'll borrow the 4 from your brother and pay him back by spring." borrow from Lonnie. He did not like it. Eleanor, I hate owing Lonnie. It's $400 in a winter, I said. We'll have it back to him before the dogwoods bloom. Eat your supper, David. I've got the books. And he did, and we borrowed it, and we paid Lonnie back by spring, and we ate beans for the better part of a month to do it. And I felt the guilt of it, like a stone in my shoe, because I had the money, and I let my family eat beans. But I had learned something on those cleaning house floors that David never had to learn, which is that the woman who breaks the seal on her one safe thing in the first emergency has no safe thing left for the second. There is always a second emergency. I was building a wall against the cold, and you do not pull a brick out of the wall to warm your hands for one night. I have never told a living soul that, about the furnace and the beans. And I am telling you, because I do not want you thinking the wall was free. It cost. A month of beans was the cheapest thing it ever cost. That is the first thing my son never understood about me. He thought a quiet woman was an empty one. He thought because I did not announce my business at the dinner table, I did not have any. He grew up watching his father drive a truck and his mother clean houses, and he decided, somewhere along the way, that we were poor, and that the house and the savings and whatever I had were the leftover scraps of 2 small lives, there to be managed by him when we got old enough to be managed. He never saw the coffee can. He never saw the account statements I kept in a locked metal box in the back of my closet. Behind the winter coats, statements I read by lamplight after David was asleep. Watching $400 become $8, become $2,000, become slowly, over years, over decades. Through 3 crashes, I gritted my teeth and held through. Become something I am not going to name to you yet, because the size of it is part of the reckoning, and the reckoning has to be earned. But I will tell you that by the year 2000, when David's heart gave out in the front parlor and I buried him in the navy suit he was married in, I was not a poor widow. I was a woman who had quietly, patiently, for 12 years, been building a wall between herself and the cold. And I had a 15-year-old son who watched me cry at the funeral and decided his mother was a fragile thing, and a house, and a small pension, and a problem he would one day have to solve. Let me tell you about the years right after David died, because those are the years that should have made it impossible for Marcus to ever call me a woman who could not count. And they are the years he chose to remember wrong. David left a small life insurance policy, $15,000, and a pension that mostly stopped when he did. The mortgage was not yet paid off. There was a 15-year-old boy who needed shoes, and a college fund that did not exist, and a roof that needed work, and a widow of 43 who, the world assumed, was about to go under. I did not go under. I want to tell you exactly how I did not, because the how is the whole point. I kept the daytime bookkeeping job, the steady one, the cleaners. In the evenings, 3 nights a week, I kept the ledgers for a funeral home, of all places, a kind man named Mr. Abernathy, who paid me in cash and let me work at his kitchen table after hours. And on Saturdays, for years, I did tax returns out of my own front parlor, the same parlor where I had buried my husband, for neighbors and church members and small business owners who trusted me. A few dollars a return, building. 3 jobs. A bookkeeper by day, a bookkeeper by night, and a tax preparer on Saturdays. And through all of it, I never touched the brokerage account. Not one share. The insurance money I split, half against the mortgage, half into the account, where it joined the wall. And every single school morning of Marcus's life, until the day he graduated high school, I made that boy's lunch. I want you to hear that, because Marcus does not seem to. No matter which job had run me to midnight, no matter how tired, I was up at 5:30 making a sandwich, cutting an apple, writing a little note some mornings on the napkin, because my own mother never had the time, and I had sworn my children would never once open a lunch and find nothing or find indifference. 3 jobs and a sandwich every morning. That is the woman my son looked at, 20-some years later, and called too simple to manage her own money. A woman who could not be trusted to handle her own affairs. A woman to be stored in a building. I paid that mortgage off in the year 2006. I remember the day I made the last payment. I drove to the bank myself, and I paid it in person, in a cashier's check, because I wanted to hand it to a human being. The young teller took it and looked at the amount, and then at me. "Paying down the principal today, ma'am?" "Paying it off," I said. "All of it. The whole thing." She typed for a moment, and then she looked up again, and her face had changed. "Ma'am, this clears the loan. The house is yours, free and clear. Congratulations." And then she said, more quietly, because I suppose my face had done something, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," I said. And I was crying at her window, and I did not explain it. But I will explain it to you. I was paying off a house with money I had earned 3 jobs at a time, a house I had buried my husband from, a house that was now mine, free and clear, in full. And not one person in the world knew what it had taken. That is the kind of victory I have had my whole life. Quiet, witnessed by a stranger who did not understand it. I drove home, and I sat in my paid-off parlor, and I did not call anyone, because there was no one to call who would have understood, except, and here is the thing, except my daughter, who I had not spoken to enough in those years. And that is the regret that has its own chapter, so let me get to her. David's death is where I have to tell you about Vanessa, because Vanessa is the name my son helped me bury, and Vanessa is the name on the deed. Vanessa is my daughter. I have 2 children. The world, by which I mostly mean Marcus, spent the last 11 years pretending I had one, and I let them. Because grief makes you quiet, and shame makes you quieter, and there are some fights you do not have the strength for when you are also keeping the lights on. But I have 2 children. Marcus is the younger, Vanessa is the elder by 3 years, and she is the one who looks like me, and she is the one who inherited my eye for a ledger, and she is the one Marcus and Tanya decided 11 years ago was no longer welcome in this family. I need you to understand what Vanessa actually did. Because if you have read the kind of story Marcus told about her, you would think she had done something monstrous. She did not. Here is the whole of it. In the year 2014, my daughter Vanessa, who was 32 years old, told her younger brother at a Thanksgiving table that she would no longer be lending him money. That is the entire crime. He had borrowed $11,000 from her over 4 years for ventures that never quite worked. A restaurant that closed, a friend's business that was not a business. And he had paid back not 1 cent. I was carrying the gravy in from the kitchen when it started, and so I came into the dining room in the middle of it. And I want to put you there with me, holding the gravy boat, because I have stood in that doorway, in my memory, 1,000 times. "It's a sure thing this time, Nessa," Marcus was saying. He always called her Nessa when he wanted something. "I just need 9 to get in on the ground floor. Carl's already in for 15. I'll pay you back the 11 and the 9, all of it, by summer." Vanessa had her fork in her hand. She set it down. She did not raise her voice. My daughter has never raised her voice in her life. She got that from me, and that day I watched her use it the way I had taught her, the quiet that lands harder than a shout. "Marcus," she said, "you said summer about the restaurant. You said it about Carl's last thing. I love you. But I'm not lending you any more money. Not 900. I'm done. The table went still. Tanya, who was his girlfriend then, set down her wine. You're done, Marcus repeated. I'm done. After everything this family's done for you. He was getting loud now, the way he did when the easy charm failed him and the entitlement came up underneath it. You sit there in your nice apartment with your nice job, looking down your nose at all of us. That's not fair, Marcus. You think you're better than us. You always have. Little Miss CPA, Little Miss I balance my checkbook. Tanya put her hand on his arm, and he shook it off. You know what your problem is? You don't actually care about this family. You never have. And then he said it. He looked at his sister across my Thanksgiving table, with the gravy going cold in my hands in the doorway. And he said, You're not really part of this family anyway. You never were. Mom only kept you out of guilt. You would have thought she had set the table on fire. Tanya leaned in then and added her own knife to it. She's always been jealous of you, baby, she said to Marcus, loud enough for the table. Bitter. Thinks she's better than all of us. And not one person at that table said a word against it. Not the cousins, not me. And I sat there. God forgive me, I sat there with the turkey going cold, and I did not stand up and put my arm around my daughter and put my son out of my house. That sentence, the one that cut my daughter out with a single breath, I have never forgiven it. And you are going to hear it land on my son again before this story's over. In a room he will not be able to walk away from. I told myself it was a fight between siblings. I told myself it would blow over. I told myself a great many comfortable things, the way you do when standing up means choosing, and choosing means losing one of them. And a mother's whole body rebels against losing any of them, even the one who is in the wrong. Vanessa got up from the table. She kissed me on the cheek. She said, Mom, I'm not going to do this. When you're ready, you know where I am. And she left. And in the 11 years that followed, Marcus and Tanya rewrote the family story so completely, so often with such confidence, that even some of my own cousins came to believe that Vanessa had abandoned her poor old mother, that Vanessa was hard, that Vanessa was the one who left. She did not abandon me. That is the lie at the center of everything, and pulling it out is the reckoning, so hold on to it. She did not abandon me. We spoke every Sunday, every single Sunday for 11 years, on the telephone, because Marcus and Tanya made the family table a place she could not safely sit. She knew about the brokerage account. She is the only person on this earth, other than the lawyer, who has ever known the size of it. She helped me set up the trust. She is a certified public accountant, my daughter, the best in her firm. And she did for me, professionally and for free and in total secrecy, what I had spent 30 years doing alone in the dark with a coffee can. She made it airtight. Because here is what we did, Vanessa and I, in the year 2015, the year after that Thanksgiving, the year after my son tried to read his own sister out of the family at my table. We took my house, and we took the bulk of my investment account, and we put them into an irrevocable trust. I named myself the beneficiary for my lifetime. I could live in the house, draw income from the investments, want for nothing, all of it mine to use until the day I died. But I named Vanessa the trustee, the sole trustee, the only living person with the legal authority to make decisions about that property. And I did one more thing, one quiet thing, that I am going to make you wait for. Because it is the last brick and Marcus is standing right where it is going to fall. Marcus did not know any of this. He thought his sister was gone, his mother fragile. The house a simple thing sitting unguarded, waiting for a son with power of attorney and a young lawyer to scoop it up while she admired the fountain at Cedar Vale. Now, let me take you inside Cedar Vale, because the quiet build happened there, in that little second-floor room over 6 weeks. And I want you to see exactly how a woman who has been counted out gathers the instrument of consequence without ever once raising her voice. The first thing I did was nothing. That is the hardest thing and the most important thing. And it is the thing my son never expected, because Marcus has never in his life understood the power of a person who does not react. I did not call a lawyer the first day. I did not scream at the staff. I did not demand to go home. I let Marcus believe that I had folded, that I was a tired old woman who would settle into her beautiful prison and admire the garden and be grateful. And I did this on purpose, because a man who thinks he has already won stops being careful. And I needed Marcus to stop being careful. So when he called on Wednesday, my second day, to ask how I was settling in, I made my voice small and warm and a little confused. I said, "It's so much to take in, sweetheart." I said, "You've always taken such good care of your mother." I felt the lie of it go down like a stone, but I said it, because I have lived long enough to know that you do not win a war by announcing the war. "It's the right thing, Mom," he said, relieved. And I could hear it. The relief, the sound of a man whose plan was going smoothly. I know it's an adjustment, but it's the right thing. "What will happen to the house?" I asked, light as anything, like a woman asking after the weather. There was a pause, a small one, and then my son said, "Don't worry about the house, Mom. We're going to take care of it. There's some upkeep it needs. We might rent it out. Get some income coming in to help cover all this. Cedar Vale isn't cheap. Rent it out." He had moved from manage things to rent it out in 2 days. And I knew the way you know a storm is coming by the color of the light, that the next word would be sell. I said, "That sounds sensible, dear." And I hung up the phone, and I sat in the chair by the window, and I did not cry. And I picked up the room telephone, the one with the long cord on the little nightstand, and I called my daughter. "Vanessa," I said, "it's Mom." "Mom." Her voice changed the second she heard mine, the way it always did, going careful and close. "What's wrong?" "Something's wrong." "Your brother has put me in a care home," I said, "and he is going to try to sell my house." The line was quiet for 3 seconds. I counted them. Then my daughter, my certified public accountant, the trustee of the Whitfield Family Trust, said something I will remember until the day I die. She said, "He can't, Mom." She said it very softly, almost gently, the way you correct a child who is afraid of a monster that cannot reach them. "He can't sell it. He doesn't own it. You don't own it. The trust owns it, and I'm the trustee, and I will never, ever sign. He cannot sell that house. It is not legally possible." "I know," I said. "He doesn't know," she said. "No," I said. "He doesn't." And then my daughter, who I had not seen in person in 3 years because of how hard her brother had made it, who I had failed to defend at a Thanksgiving table 11 years before, said the thing that finally made me cry that night. She said, "Mom, I'm coming to get you." "Not yet. We're going to do this right, the way you taught me, with the paperwork airtight. But I want you to know, you are coming home. You hear me? You are coming home, and your name and my name are on that deed. And there is not one thing that man can do about it." I held the phone against my ear with both hands, like I was a girl on the line with a sweetheart. And I cried. And across the city, my daughter cried with me. And that is the part Marcus will never get to take from me, no matter what else happens. He could put me in a building. He could pack my emerald blouse into a suitcase. But he could not get between me and the child he tried to erase. Because that child was the wall I had been building for 30 years, and she was about to become the door I walked out through. There was a woman at Cedar Vale named Miss Pearl, 84 years old, who had the room next to mine. And on my third morning, she found me at breakfast and sat down across from me uninvited. "You're the new one," she said. "The son or the daughter?" "I'm sorry," I said. "Which one put you here?" She buttered her toast and did not look up. "Everybody in this building got put here by somebody. I'm asking, which one did you?" "My son," I said. "It's usually the son." She nodded, as if I had confirmed the weather. "With me, it was mine too. Sold my house in Florida the second week I was in here. They always go for the house first. You watch. If they haven't sold yours yet, they will." And then she looked up at me, with eyes that had seen the whole game played out, and she lowered her voice. "Honey, the only ones who ever get out of here are the ones with something the kids didn't know about. You got something they don't know about?" I did not answer her. But I have thought about Miss Pearl many times since, because she was right. And because she did not have a Vanessa, and because for every story like mine that ends the way mine ended, there are 100 Miss Pearls who had the house taken and no name on a deed to stop it. And that is part of why I built the scholarship the way I did. But I am getting ahead of myself again. Here is the thing I want you to hold through this whole middle stretch. The thing that ticked under every quiet day at Cedar Vale like a clock I could not turn off. The closing. Once Vanessa found out about Ron Castellano and the developer and the penciled-in date, we knew there was a clock running. The closing was set for the second week of May. When I checked in, it was the middle of March. That gave us, at the start, 61 days. 61 days to build something airtight enough that it would not just stop the sale, but make it impossible for my son to ever tell a story in which he was the wronged party. And every Sunday call with Vanessa began, after a while, the same way. "How many days, Mom?" 54, I would say. Or the next week, 47. The week after that, 39. "Good," she would say, every time. "We're on schedule. You holding up?" "I'm watching a number go down, Vanessa. It's the most interesting thing in this building. Tell me what Mr. Reyes did this week." And she would. And I would write it in my head the way I once wrote figures in a ledger. And then she would say, 38 days, Mom. Don't let him see you counting." And we would hang up, and I would sit by the window with the number ticking. It was the only thing in that little room that moved, and I watched it the way I had once watched a coffee can, because a person with a falling number to watch does not have time to fall apart. We did not move fast, but we did not have forever either. And the gap between those two truths was the hardest place I have ever had to stand. The slowness was the discipline, and the discipline was the whole thing. Vanessa is a professional. She does not make mistakes, and she would not let me make any either. "If we move too fast, Mom," she told me on the next Sunday call, "if we just show up with a lawyer and rip the rug out, he'll say you're not in your right mind. He has the medical power of attorney. He'll claim the trust was you being manipulated by your estranged, vindictive daughter. We have to build it so there is no story he can tell that holds up. We have to make it boring. We have to make it airtight. Boring and airtight wins. Drama loses." So we built it boring. Over the next 5 weeks, Here is what my daughter quietly did, while my son thought I was admiring the fountain. First, she had me evaluated. Not by Marcus's people, by an independent geriatric physician, a kind, brisk woman named Dr. Okafor, who came to Cedar Vale at Vanessa's arrangement and spent 90 minutes with me. And I want you to sit through that 90 minutes with me, because it is where the first brick was laid. She sat across from me with a clipboard, the way they do, and she said, "Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to ask you some questions that may seem a little silly. Humor me. What's the date today?" "It's the 2nd of April, I said. "Wednesday. Spring, in case the parking lot out my window hasn't made that clear. And before you ask, the governor's name is the one you're thinking of. And I can tell you who held the office before him too, if you've got the time." She looked up from the clipboard. "I have the time." So I told her. 3 of them in order with the years. She wrote faster. "Count backward from 100 by 7s for me. 93, 86, 79, 72, 65, I said. And I did not slow down. 58, 51, 44. Shall I keep going, or have I made my point? She set the pen down. "Mrs. Whitfield, you have a sharper mind than I do before my coffee." "I did the books for a dry cleaning chain for 30 years, doctor," I said. "7s are nothing. Ask me to spell something." "All right, spell world backward." "DLROW, I said. "And while we're at it, IRREVOCABLE backward is ELBACOVERRI. Irrevocable. It's the kind of trust my son does not know I have. Write that one down too, if you would." She laughed out loud then, and she did write it down, all of it. And 90 minutes later, she had a 4-page report. And it said, in the careful language of medicine, that Eleanor Whitfield was fully oriented, fully competent, possessed of complete decision-making capacity, and showed no sign whatsoever of cognitive impairment. She dated it. She signed it. Vanessa had 3 certified copies made. That report was the first brick of the instrument of consequence. And Marcus, who thought he had a fragile old woman, had just handed me the one weapon he could never have anticipated, which was a paper trail proving I had never been fragile at all. Second, Vanessa pulled the deed. She drove to the county recorder's office on a Thursday and pulled the official recorded deed to the house, and she had it certified, the raised seal and all. And she mailed me a copy. And I want to tell you what it felt like to hold that document in my hands in that little room. The grantor and grantee lines did not say David Whitfield. They did not say only Eleanor Whitfield. They said, in the dry, beautiful language of property law, that the premises were held by the Whitfield Family Trust, dated the 9th of June, 2015. Vanessa Whitfield, trustee. My daughter's name, in black ink, on the public record, for 11 years. While Marcus told everyone she had abandoned us, her name had been sitting on the deed to the family home, waiting like a held breath. He never checked. In all the time he spent planning to sell that house, in all the conversations with his young lawyer, he never once paid the small fee to pull the recorded deed because he was so certain, so absolutely certain, that he knew what his family was made of. He knew his mother was poor and fragile. He knew his sister was gone. He knew the house was a simple thing he could take. He knew it the way a man knows a thing he has never bothered to check, which is to say, he did not know it at all. Third, and this is where I have to tell you about the money, the real number. Because Vanessa made me face it on a Sunday call, and I will let you hear it the way she made me hear it. "Mom," she said, "I need you to say the number out loud. To me? Right now." because you've spent 30 years pretending it's smaller than it is, and we are done pretending. Marcus thinks you have a paid-off house and maybe $60,000 in the bank. I need you to tell me what is actually in the trust account, the brokerage, all of it. Say it. And I sat in that chair by the window, and I said the number. And it was the first time in 30 years I had said it aloud to a living soul. $2,300,000, I said, and change. There was a silence on the line. Mom, Vanessa said, very quietly, $2.3 million. And the house, I said, which is paid off, which is worth about $400,000 more. Mom, I know. You started with $400 saved out of cleaning wages. I started with $400 in a coffee can, I said, in 1988, and I never told anyone, and I held through every crash, and I reinvested every dividend, and I let it compound for 37 years, and that is what a quiet woman who pays attention can do when she decides not to be poor. Your father never knew. Your brother never guessed. You're the only one I ever told. My daughter was crying again. All those years, she said, while he was calling us poor, while he was deciding what to do with us when we got old. While he was deciding, I agreed. Yes. I did not enjoy this. Not the way you might think. There is a particular grief in being underestimated by your own child for so long that he builds his entire idea of you out of the wrong material. Marcus did not just fail to know the number. He failed to know me. He looked at the woman who fed him from 3 jobs, made his lunch every morning, and held a financial position through 3 market crashes without flinching. And he saw a frail old lady who needed managing. The money was almost the smaller insult. The bigger one was that he had decided who I was, decided it completely, and never once thought to check the deed, the account, the woman herself. I will tell you the hardest thing I ever did with that account, because it is the thing that proves I had the head Marcus said I did not have, and it has nothing to do with being lucky. In the autumn of 2008, the market fell apart. You will remember it. The whole world remembered it. I opened my statement that October by lamplight after a shift, and the account that I had built for 20 years had lost, on paper, almost 40% of its value in a matter of weeks. I sat at my kitchen table and I did the arithmetic, and the number that had been my whole secret life had fallen by an amount that would have made a stronger-stomached person than me sell everything and run for the hills. I did not sell. I want you to understand what that cost, because it is the truest measure of me. Every instinct in my body, every memory of being poor, every fear I had carried since the green linoleum floor, was screaming at me to save what was left. And I sat with that statement, and I remembered what Mr. Halloran told me in 1988. If you really never sell, and I made myself a cup of tea, and I did not sell one single share. And what is more, I kept buying, all the way down, a little every month, into the teeth of the worst of it, because the companies still made soap and food and medicine, and people still needed soap and food and medicine. By the year 2012, the account was back. By 2015, it had doubled past where it started. The 40% I watched vanish in 2008 is a meaningful part of the fortune my son said I was too simple to have. Holding through that crash, sitting at a kitchen table by lamplight with my whole secret life cut nearly in half and choosing to do nothing but pour a cup of tea and keep buying. That is the nerve Marcus looked at and called fragile. There is nothing fragile about a woman who can watch that number fall and not flinch. But Vanessa was right. The same nerve that held through the crash is the nerve that let me be small on the telephone for 6 weeks. So we kept building, slow and quiet and unbreakable. Fourth, Vanessa retained a lawyer, a real one, an estate and elder law attorney named Mr. Reyes, 63 years old, slow-spoken, who had been doing this for 35 years and who, when Vanessa laid out the whole situation in his office, did not get excited. He got quiet. He read Dr. Okafor's report twice. He read the trust documents. He read the recorded deed. And then he took off his glasses and said, "According to Vanessa, your brother has made an interesting assumption, hasn't he? Let's let him keep making it for a little while longer." Mr. Reyes had no taste for theatrics either. I knew I was in good hands. And fifth, this is the last piece of the build, and it is the one that turned a legal victory into a reckoning. Vanessa found out about the buyer because Marcus had not been idle. While I was being boring, my son was being busy. He had listed the house. Quietly, pocket listed, but listed. And he had a buyer, a developer, a man who bought up old brick houses on streets like Lattimore and turned them into duplexes. And Marcus had told this man the property would be available as soon as the family settles some affairs. And they had a number, $410,000, and they had a closing date penciled in for the second week of May. And my son intended to pocket the proceeds into an account I would never see, because he had power of attorney over my health care, and he had simply decided, wrongly, illegally, but with total confidence, that this extended to my property. It did not. He had built a $410,000 sale on top of a power he did not have, over a house he did not own, held by a trustee who would sooner cut off her own hand than sign his papers. I did not fully understand the law of that yet. So Vanessa sent the one man who could explain it. Mr. Reyes came to Cedar Vale himself one Tuesday to explain the law of it to me in person, because he said a client should never sign her name to a strategy she does not fully understand. And I have loved him for that ever since. He sat in the stiff visitor's chair with his hat on his knee, and he laid it out the way you would explain a fence line to someone who has lived on the land her whole life. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said, "there are two kinds of power of attorney, and your son has the wrong one for what he is trying to do. A healthcare power of attorney lets a person speak to your doctors if you cannot speak for yourself. That is all it does. It does not let him sell your property, move your money, or sign your name to a deed." "And the other kind?" I asked. "A financial power of attorney, a separate document, separate language. You never signed one." "I never would have," I said. "I believe you." He smiled, a slow, careful smile. "But here is the part I want you to hold on to, because it is the part your son will never climb over. Even a financial power of attorney would not save him." "Why not?" "Because a power of attorney lets a man act in your place," he said. "It cannot give him a power you do not have yourself. And you, Mrs. Whitfield, have no power to sell that house." I sat with that. "Because I do not own it," I said. "Because you do not own it," he agreed. "The trust owns it. The trust has owned it for 11 years. You handed the only key to that deed to your daughter in 2015, on purpose, with full intent, in front of a notary. Your son could walk in here with every power of attorney ever drafted in this state, and not one of them would open that door, because the door was never yours to give him. It is Vanessa's, and she is never going to turn that key for him." "No," I said. "She is not." "Then he has built his whole plan," Mr. Reyes said, putting his hat back on a floor that is not there. "We will simply let him keep standing on it until the day it matters." And that was exactly what we did. And Vanessa, my Vanessa, looked at that closing date in May and said to Mr. Reyes, "Don't stop him yet." "Pardon?" said Mr. Reyes. "Don't send the cease and desist yet. Don't tip him off. Let him schedule the closing. Let him invite his buyer. Let him stand up in that title company conference room with the developer and the closing agent and feel like a man who is about to make $400,000 selling his fragile mother's house out from under her. And then let my mother walk in. Mr. Reyes, who had been practicing law for 35 years and had presumably seen a great deal, was quiet for a moment. And then, Vanessa told me, the old lawyer smiled for the first time in their entire acquaintance and said, "Mrs. Whitfield's daughter, I believe I am going to enjoy working with you." The weeks in between were the longest of my life, and they were not easy. And I will not gloss over what they cost, because they cost a great deal. I had to keep being small on the telephone with Marcus. I had to keep saying, "Thank you, sweetheart," and "You take such good care of me." He came to visit once, on a Sunday, about 3 weeks in, and that visit nearly broke me. So let me put you in the room for it. He brought a potted plant and a box of chocolates, and he sat in the vinyl chair across from me with his easy smile. "You look good, Mom," he said. "Rested, see? This place agrees with you." "How's the house, Marcus?" I asked. "Light. Always light." "Oh, it's fine, it's fine. We've got a property manager looking at it. There's some work to do." He waved his hand. "Don't worry about it. How's the food here? They feeding you all right?" "The food's fine," I said. "Marcus, are you renting it or selling it?" A flicker, just a flicker, behind the smile. "We're keeping our options open, Mom. Whatever makes the most financial sense. That's my job, right? To handle the numbers so you don't have to." He laughed. "Lord knows you never had a head for that stuff. Dad always said you'd give away the last dollar in the house if a stranger asked nice." I sat there. My son, telling me to my face that I had no head for money. 3 weeks after I had quietly confirmed I had a fortune he knew nothing about. Built past $2 million while he slept. And the worst part is that for one moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Because he believed it so completely, he had built his whole self on top of the idea that he was the clever one, and I was the soft one. And I knew that the day that floor came out from under him was going to hurt him more than any house ever could. He talked for a while then. His deals, Tanya's redecorating, a boat he was thinking about. And then, casually, as if it were nothing, he said the thing that nearly broke my composure. "Oh, we're going to clear out some of the old furniture at the house. The recliner, that heavy china cabinet, your mother's old pieces. Tanya says it just makes a place look dated, and a stager told us it shows better empty. David's recliner. My mother's china cabinet. The word shows better empty. The word a person uses for a house that is going on the market, not a house being rented." "Whatever you think is best, dear," I said. And my voice did not shake. And you should know what that cost me, because every instinct I had was to stand up and tell him those were not his to clear. But the war is not won by announcing the war. "That's the spirit," he said, pleased. He stood, kissed the top of my head the way you kiss a child, and told me again that this was the right thing. Not once in that whole visit did he ask me a question about myself that he waited to hear the answer to. I had become furniture in his story. A problem solved, a box checked. Furniture, like the recliner, to be cleared out so the place showed better empty. And after he left, I sat in the dark for a long time, with the chocolates unopened in my lap, and I let myself feel exactly how much it cost, once, for 1 hour. And then I put it away, and I called my daughter and I said, 36 days. But I want to tell you about the other thing that happened in those weeks, because it was not all cold. Vanessa started coming. Not openly. We could not have Marcus knowing we were in contact. But my daughter would sign in at the Cedar Vale front desk as a family friend, a Mrs. Coleman, with a hat and her reading glasses, and she would come up to my room on a Tuesday or a Thursday afternoon, and she would sit on the end of my bed the way she did when she was a girl, and we would talk. We had 11 years to talk about. 11 years of Sunday phone calls is a great deal of talking, but it is not the same as a hand you can hold. One afternoon, she brought photographs, and she laid them out on the bedspread one at a time. "That's my apartment," she said. "That whole wall is books. You'd hate how I shelve them, no system at all." She slid another one over. "That's the firm. The corner office is mine now since March." I had not known that. I had not known my own daughter had a corner office. "And this one?" I asked. It was a Christmas photograph. My daughter and a kind-faced man in front of a tree, both of them laughing at whoever held the camera. She looked down at it for a moment before she answered. "That's Derek. We've been together 2 years." "2 years," I said. "And you never told me it was serious." "I didn't want to bring him into this family, Mom," she said very quietly. "The way they'd made it. I didn't want him meeting people who acted like I didn't exist." And I held that photograph of my daughter and a man I had never met, in an apartment I had never visited, with a corner office I had never been told about. And I understood the full size of what Marcus and Tanya's lie had cost. Not money. Money I had plenty of. Years with my own daughter that I would not get back, taken while they painted her as the villain. And I had let them, out of grief and shame and the cowardice that even good mothers are capable of when the alternative is choosing. "I'm sorry, Vanessa," I said, "for the Thanksgiving, for not standing up. I should have put him out of the house that night. I should have stood up." And my daughter, sitting on the end of my hospital-cornered bed in a care home her brother had locked me in, took my hand and said, "Mom, you're standing up now." And she looked around the lavender-smelling room, at the window over the parking lot, and she smiled in a way I had not seen since she was young. "Boy, are you standing up now?" We laughed. In that room, we laughed. And I want you to hold that, the two of us laughing in that little room, because it is the heart of the whole thing. The reckoning that was coming was not about hurting Marcus. I need you to understand that, because the law of my life is that I do not gloat, and I did not. The reckoning was about this. It was about a mother and a daughter, separated by a lie, finding their way back to a room where they could laugh. The house, the money, the closing, all of it was just the machinery. The thing itself was the two of us, hand in hand, deciding to be a family again on our own terms, with the door locked against the people who had broken it. There was one Tuesday visit I have to tell you about on its own, because it is the day the plan stopped being a wish and became a thing with a date on it. Vanessa came in under her Mrs. Coleman hat, and she did not sit on the end of the bed that day. She sat upright with the light behind her, and she had her work face on, the one I imagine she wears at the firm, and she laid a folder open on the little table by the window, and she said, "Mom, I met with Mr. Reyes again this morning. I need to walk you through the whole thing, start to finish, because when we do this, there's no taking it back, and I will not do one piece of it without you understanding every step. That is my daughter. I taught her to pay attention, and she pays attention to everything, including her own mother's right to know exactly what is being done in her name. She walked me through it. The doctor's report was done. 3 certified copies, locked in Mr. Reyes's safe. The recorded deed was pulled and certified. The trust instrument was confirmed valid, unbroken, 11 years on the books. Mr. Reyes had personally driven past the house and seen the property manager lockbox on the door and the quiet little for sale notice in the window. And he had, through a colleague who did business with Meridian Title, confirmed the closing. Thursday, the 14th of May, 2 o'clock, 3rd floor. 20 days? Vanessa said. 20 days, I said. Here is what Mr. Reyes wants to do, she said. And here is where I disagree with him, and you get the deciding vote. Mr. Reyes wants to send a cease and desist letter on Monday. Stop the sale cold, clean, legal. Marcus gets a letter from a lawyer, the sale collapses, nobody has to be in a room together. Safe. And what do you want to do? I asked. My daughter looked at me, and I saw something move behind her eyes. 11 years of it. I want you in that room, Mom, she said. Not because I want him humiliated. I don't need that. I've made my peace with what he is. I want you in that room because for 11 years he has told a story about this family where you are a frail old woman with no power and I am a villain who walked away. And a letter doesn't change that story. He'd just tell everyone his evil sister manipulated his senile mother with paperwork. The only thing that ends the story is for him to see you. Competent, dignified, in your right mind, standing on your own 2 feet. And to hear, out loud, in front of witnesses, that you knew, you always knew, and you chose me. That's not revenge. That's the truth, said in a room where you can't edit it afterward. She paused. But it's your name on it, Mom. Your call. We can do it Mr. Reyes' safe way. I'll support whatever you choose. I thought about Miss Pearl, 2 doors down, who got the letter and lost the house anyway, because the letter could not give her back her dignity. I thought about 37 years in the dark, and I thought about the word temporary, said 6 times in that gray suit. I'll be in the room, I said. So that became the plan. We would let the closing happen. Or rather, we would let Marcus think the closing was happening, right up until the moment it became something else entirely. And I, Eleanor Whitfield, 68 years old, 6 weeks into a care home my son had locked me in, would be in that room. Now, the 2nd week of May. Mr. Reyes had done his quiet work. He had filed nothing yet, served nothing yet, tipped off no one. He had simply confirmed, through the kind of careful channels old lawyers have, the date and time and place of the closing Marcus had arranged. Thursday, the 14th of May, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, at the offices of Meridian Title and Escrow, downtown 3rd floor, the large conference room. The developer would be there. The closing agent would be there. Marcus would be there with his young lawyer, ready to sign away a house he did not own. And on the morning of Thursday, the 14th of May, I checked myself out of Cedar Vale. I want to be precise about this, because it matters legally, and it matters to the heart of it. I checked myself out. Not Vanessa, not Mr. Reyes, me. Because I was a fully competent adult, I had the 4-page report from Dr. Okafor to prove it 3 times over. And I had never been committed, only placed. And a competent adult cannot be held in an assisted living facility against her will. I had simply not exercised my right to leave for 6 weeks on purpose while we built. That morning, I dressed carefully. The navy blazer, the emerald green silk blouse Tanya had folded into the suitcase with such contempt, my pearl earrings that David had given me on our 20th anniversary, my wedding band, which I still wear. I looked at myself in the small mirror over the dresser in that borrowed room, and I did not see a frail old woman, and I had not for one single day of those 6 weeks. And that morning, finally, I was going to let everyone else see what I saw. I stopped at Miss Pearl's door on my way out. She was sitting by her window with her coffee. "I'm leaving, Miss Pearl," I said. She turned and looked at me, at the blazer, at the suitcase, at the chin. And she smiled, slow, a smile with 84 years in it. So, you did have something they didn't know about, she said. I did, I said. Go on then, she said, and she turned back to her window. Go on and break their hearts. Some of us will never get the chance. And I have thought about Miss Pearl at her window every day since, and she is the reason there is a scholarship. But I am still getting ahead of myself. The staff at the front desk, when I came down in my blazer with my one suitcase and said, I'll be checking out now, thank you, my daughter is downstairs, did not stop me. They could not. They had no legal grounds. The kind woman at the desk looked surprised, and then, I think, looked a little glad, the way decent people do when they have watched a quiet injustice for 6 weeks and finally see it about to turn. Vanessa was in the parking lot in her car, with Mr. Reyes in the back seat holding a brown accordion folder. I came down the front steps of Cedar Vale into the May sunshine, the first real sunshine I had stood in, unsupervised, in 6 weeks. And my daughter got out of the car and put her arms around me, and we stood there in the parking lot for a moment. In the car, on the way downtown, no one said much. Mr. Reyes went over the order of things once, quietly, from the back seat. He would speak first, then I would speak. Then Vanessa would arrive at the end with the documents. And then he fell silent and let us be. I watched the city go by through the window, the city I had cleaned houses in and done books in and made a life in. And at a red light, Vanessa reached over without looking and took my hand and squeezed it, the way she had on the end of the bed. And she said, How are you, Mom? Truly, I haven't been this clear in my mind in 11 years, I said. And it was true. Then I asked her because I could not help it, the old habit. How many days, Vanessa? She laughed, a little wet. 0, Mom. Today's the day. The counter ran out. The light turned green. We went downtown. I want to walk you into that conference room with me, slowly, because this is the reckoning, and the law of my life says the reckoning must happen live, in the room, with the words said out loud and not summarized after. So we are going to be in the room. Meridian Title and Escrow was on the 3rd floor of a glass building downtown. The conference room had a long table and tall windows and a pitcher of ice water sweating on a tray. When we arrived, Mr. Reyes first, then Vanessa, then me. Last, in my navy blazer and my emerald blouse and my pearl earrings, carrying the brass-cornered burgundy folder that held the certified deed and Dr. Okafor's report and the trust documents. Marcus was already seated at the table. He had his back to the door. He was laughing at something. The developer, a heavy man named Phil Brandt, in an expensive, open-collared shirt, was across from him, and the closing agent, a young woman with a stack of documents, was at the head, and Marcus's young lawyer, the one who charged by the quarter hour, was beside him with a leather portfolio. There were papers spread across the table, the papers that were going to sell my house. Marcus did not turn around when the door opened. He thought it was coffee, or notary, or someone's assistant. He kept talking. I heard the tail end of his sentence as I came in. He was saying, and honestly, the place practically runs itself once you've got the financing lined up. My mother's situation made the timeline work out perfectly. My mother's situation. I stood just inside the door, and Vanessa stood beside me. And Mr. Reyes set his accordion folder on the end of the table with a soft, deliberate sound. And it was that sound, the soft slap of a folder set down by a man who was in no hurry, that made my son finally turn around in his chair. I watched his face. I am going to remember his face for the rest of my life. And I am not ashamed to tell you that. Because I did not put that expression on it. He did. First he saw me, and for one instant, one single instant before the rest of it arrived, his face did the thing a child's face does, automatic, helpless, a flicker of the boy I raised, a flicker of Mom. And then the instant passed, and the calculation came in behind it, and I watched my son try to make me make sense. Why was his mother here? His mother was at Cedar Vale. His mother was a problem he had solved. His mother did not just appear at his closing in a navy blazer with her chin up. And then he saw Vanessa. I wish I could make you see it. He went gray. The blood went out of his face the way water goes out of a tub, all at once, from the top down. Because if I being here did not make sense, Vanessa being here made a terrible, dawning, specific kind of sense. The kind that arrives in the body before the mind has caught up. He had spent 11 years telling everyone his sister was gone. And here she was, in a charcoal suit, with a leather briefcase, looking like exactly what she was, which was a person who handled money for a living and had come to handle some now. "Mom?" Marcus said. His voice cracked on the one syllable. What are you doing here? You're supposed to be... How did you... "Hello, Marcus," I said. The developer looked confused. The closing agent looked up from her stack. The young lawyer beside Marcus straightened, sensing, the way young lawyers do too late, that the room had just changed shape. Mr. Reyes spoke first, because that was the plan. And the plan was that the lawyer spoke the law, and I spoke the family. Mr. Reyes said, in his slow, pleasant voice, to the room in general, "Good afternoon. My name is Arturo Reyes. I'm an attorney representing the Whitfield Family Trust, which is the record owner of the property at the center of today's closing. I'm afraid there's been a significant misunderstanding about who has authority to sell this house. I'd ask that we pause the proceedings before anyone signs anything they'll regret." "There's no misunderstanding," Marcus said, and he was rallying now, the color coming back, the salesman coming back. He turned to the developer with a tight smile. "Phil, this is a family matter. I apologize. My sister and I have some history. She has no standing here. I have power of attorney. I'm handling my mother's affairs. Mom, you shouldn't be here. You're confused. Let me..." "I am not confused," I said. I said it quietly. I did not raise my voice. I have never in my life found it necessary to raise my voice, and I was not going to start in a conference room full of strangers. But something in the quiet of it stopped the room, the way quiet can, and Marcus's mouth closed. "I am not confused," I said again. "Dr. Adesi Okafor, a geriatric specialist, examined me 6 weeks ago independently at the care home you placed me in, Marcus. She found me fully competent, fully oriented, with no cognitive impairment of any kind. I have 3 certified copies of her report. Would you like one for your records?" I set the burgundy folder on the table and opened it, slowly, and drew out a stapled 4-page document and slid it down the polished surface toward my son, and it came to rest in front of him, and he looked at it like it was a snake. "Mom, you told this man," I said, with a small nod to the developer, "that my situation made your timeline work out perfectly. So let's talk about my situation. Let's all talk about it, since we're all here." I looked around the table, at the developer, at the closing agent, at the young lawyer who was now flipping frantically through his portfolio. 6 weeks ago, my son told me I'd had a fall and wasn't safe in my own home and placed me in the Cedar Vale care home. Temporarily, he said. Temporarily. And then he listed my house for sale, arranged this closing, and intended to pocket $410,000 from the sale of a home he believed I owned and was too frail and too foolish to protect. "You don't understand the financials, Mom," Marcus started. And that is where I felt the old fire come up, and I let exactly 1 degree of it into my voice, no more. "I understand the financials, Marcus. Better than every person at this table combined," I said. "Now sit down and let me finish, because you are about to learn how badly you understand them." He sat. My grown son sat down in his chair like a boy. And the developer, Phil Brandt, looked from Marcus to me and back again with the expression of a man who is realizing his afternoon, and possibly his deal, is over. But Marcus did not stay down. He never could take a loss sitting down. That was always his trouble. He came back up, leaning forward, hands flat on the table. And he tried the thing he always tried, which was to make it about the relationship instead of the facts. "Mom, this is exactly what I was afraid of," he said. And now there was a tremble in it. Real or performed, I could not tell. And I'd stopped being able to tell years ago. "Vanessa got to you. She's been in your ear, hasn't she? She found out you were vulnerable and she swooped in. Mom, she abandoned you for 11 years, and the second there's money on the table, here she is. Can't you see what she's doing? She's using you to get back at me. And here is the thing. A year before, that might have worked on me. That tone, the wounded son, the manipulative sister. Marcus had run that play on me for 11 years, and it had always worked, because I wanted so badly for it to be true that he was the good one. But I'd spent 6 weeks in a borrowed bed with a falling counter on the nightstand, and I was clear now. And I looked at my son, and I said quietly, "Vanessa called me every Sunday for 11 years, Marcus. Every single Sunday, while you told everyone she was gone." I let that land. She didn't find out I was vulnerable. She's the one who built the trust 11 years ago, before there was any care home, before there was any of this. Because even then, she was protecting me from a day she could see coming, and I could not. The only person in this room who found out I was vulnerable and swooped in for the money. And I did not raise my voice. I never raised my voice. Is you? That is not... Marcus started, and his young lawyer put a hand on his arm now, the way Tanya once had. And Marcus shook it off the way he had shaken off Tanya. Because my son has never in his life let anyone stop him from talking his way deeper into a hole. Mom, I had power of attorney. You gave me power of attorney. That means you trusted me to make these decisions. I gave you a healthcare power of attorney, I said. So you could speak to my doctors if I were ever unconscious. You turned it into a deed to my house. Those are not the same document, Marcus. And the difference between them is about to cost you everything you came here for. Now. And I turned away from him because I was done arguing with my son. And I turned to the closing agent, the young woman with the stack of papers. And I spoke to her directly. Because she was the one with the legal duty here, and I wanted it clean. "Miss," I said, "what name is listed as the seller on your documents? The grantor of the property?" She looked down. She shuffled. She found it. The seller is listed as Eleanor Whitfield, by Marcus Whitfield, attorney in fact under power of attorney. "And do you have a copy of the recorded deed?" I asked. "The actual deed, on file with the county. Did anyone pull it?" The room was silent. The young lawyer's face told me the answer. No one had pulled the deed. They had taken Marcus's word and Marcus's power of attorney document, and a title search that, I would learn later, had been rushed and shallow, and they had built a closing on it. "I have it here," I said. and I drew out the certified deed with its raised seal, and I handed it not to Marcus, but to the closing agent, because she was the professional and she would understand it fastest. Read the grantee, please. Read who owns this house. Read it out loud so my son can hear it. The young woman took the document. I watched her eyes move. I watched her find the line, and I watched her face change, that small professional flinch, the realization that she had nearly presided over the sale of a house by a man who had no right to sell it. The property, she read, is held by the Whitfield Family Trust, dated June 9th, 2015. She paused. Trustee, Vanessa Whitfield. And the room turned, all of it, every face, toward my daughter. Marcus made a sound. I cannot describe it as a word. It was the sound of a man watching the floor he had been standing on for 11 years turn out to have never been there. Vanessa stepped forward then. She had not said one word since we entered the room. That was the plan, too, that she would let the document speak and then arrive at the end, like the period at the end of a sentence. And she set her briefcase on the table and she opened it. And she took out the full trust instrument, the recorded copy. And she looked at her younger brother across 11 years of silence. And she said, in a voice as calm as still water, "Hello, Marcus. I'm the trustee. I've been the trustee for 11 years. My name has been on the deed to that house for 11 years, on the public record, available to anyone who paid the fee to look. You never looked." She let that sit. "You told everyone I'd abandoned this family. You told Mom's cousins I was bitter, that I was jealous, that I'd walked away from my own mother. And the whole time, my name was on the deed of the family home, because Mom trusted me to protect it, to protect her, from exactly this." She slid the trust document across to him. "I will never sign a transfer of this property to you or to anyone you direct. Not today. Not ever. You have no authority over this house, Marcus. You never did. Your healthcare power of attorney lets you talk to her doctors. That is the entire extent of your power, and you have abused even that." The young lawyer beside Marcus finally found his voice, and it came out thin. My client and I were operating under the good faith belief that—" "Your client," Mr. Reyes said pleasantly, "was operating under the belief that his mother was a frail, ignorant woman with no one to protect her. He was wrong on all 3 counts. I'd advise you, counselor, to pull recorded deeds before you schedule closings. It's a small fee. It saves a great deal of embarrassment." He turned to the developer. "Mr. Brandt, is it? There is no sale here. There never could have been. The seller doesn't own the property. I'd recommend you collect your deposit and consider yourself fortunate to have learned this before the wire cleared rather than after." The developer stood up, gathered his coat, gave Marcus one long look, the look a man gives someone who has wasted his time and nearly his money, and left without a word. The closing agent began, quietly and quickly, to gather her papers, the closing dissolving in front of her like sugar in water. But before the developer reached the door, Vanessa spoke once more, and she did not speak to him. She spoke to Marcus, and her voice did not rise either, because she is her mother's daughter. 11 years ago, she said, "At Mom's Thanksgiving table, you told me I wasn't really part of this family. You said Mom only kept me out of guilt." The developer paused in the doorway despite himself. "I've thought about that sentence 1,000 times, Marcus, and I want you to hear what I figured out." She closed her briefcase. "You were the one who wasn't really part of this family. You just got to decide that it was me. For 11 years, because nobody made you look. Mom made you look today. My name's the one on the deed. It always was. That's not guilt, Marcus. That's who she trusted. And she clicked the briefcase shut, and the small sound of it was the truest period at the end of any sentence I have ever heard. Marcus had no answer. For the first time in his life, in front of witnesses, my son had no explanation ready, and the silence where his explanation should have been was the loudest thing in that room. And then it was just us, the family. Marcus, gray and small in his chair, his young lawyer packing up beside him, and Vanessa and me, and Mr. Reyes by the door. This was the moment, you understand. This was the moment for the cruelty, if there was going to be any. This was the moment a different woman might have leaned across the table and made him taste every drop of it, might have told him about the fortune he would never see now, might have laughed. I did not laugh. I walked around the table. I walked to where my son was sitting, and I stood beside his chair, and he looked up at me, and the salesman was gone, and the schemer was gone, and what was left looking up at me was just Marcus, my boy, 41 years old and caught, and frightened, and ashamed. And I felt, I will be honest, the law says I must. I felt no triumph. I felt the oldest, tiredest grief I have ever known, because I had won, and winning meant I now knew, beyond any possibility of pretending otherwise, exactly what my son was. Marcus, I said, look at me. He looked at me. I made your lunch every morning for 12 years, I said. I worked 3 jobs so you would never know we were short. I held a hard line through 3 market crashes so that you and your sister would never be poor the way I was afraid of being poor. And you looked at all of that. And you decided I was a fragile old woman you could store in a building and sell out from under. You decided your sister was gone. You decided you understood this family. I shook my head slowly. You never looked, son. At the deed. At the account. At your sister. At me. You decided you knew. And you never checked a single thing you decided. Mom, he said, and his eyes were wet now. And I could not tell. I genuinely could not tell, and this is the truest and saddest thing. Whether the wet was for what he had done, or only for what he had lost. Mom, I'm sorry, I can explain. I was under a lot of pressure. The business, Tanya and I were... I'm sure you can explain, I said gently. You've always been able to explain. That was never the problem. I straightened up. I picked my burgundy folder up off the table. And I said the only boundary I had come to say. And I said it without raising my voice. And it was the last thing I said to my son in that room. I'm going home now, Marcus. To my house. The one with my daughter's name on the deed. And I am going to live there. And Vanessa is going to visit me on Sundays, in person, at my table. The way it should have been for the last 11 years. You will not be coming to that table. Not until you understand that the thing you tried to sell was never the house. I looked at him one more time. You're my son. I will always love you. That is not the same as letting you back in. Those are 2 different things. And at 68, I have finally learned to tell them apart. And I walked out of that conference room with my daughter on one side of me and a 35-year elder law attorney on the other. And I did not look back. Because there was nothing behind me I needed. And everything ahead of me I had built myself, $400 at a time, in the dark, for 37 years. We went home that afternoon, to the house on Lattimore Street. Marcus's real estate sign was still in the yard. He had put it there in March, the week he checked me in, as if the house were already his. Vanessa pulled it out of the ground with her bare hands while I watched from the front walk, and she carried it to the trash bins at the side of the house and dropped it in. and the sound of it going into the empty bin was, I will tell you, one of the sweetest sounds of my whole long life. The maple I planted the year Marcus was born was leafing out, full and green, 41 summers old. The white trim David painted the summer before he died was peeling a little, and I made a note to have it done. I went up the front steps I had carried my babies up, and I put my key in the lock of my own front door. And I went inside, into my own front parlor, where David's photograph still sat on the mantel, and where I had buried him, and where my son had once tried to cut my daughter out of the family with a single sentence. And I set my burgundy folder down on the side table, and I sat in my own chair, and I was home. The house was not quite as I had left it. Marcus's property manager had been through. There was a lockbox still hanging on the inside doorknob, and there were little numbered stickers on some of the furniture, an estate sale kind of inventory, somebody pricing my life while I admired a fountain. Vanessa went through and peeled every sticker off with her thumbnail, one by one, room by room, and we did not say much while she did it. But every sticker that came off was a small thing returned to me. My mother's china cabinet, David's recliner, the dining table where the gravy had gone cold. Mine again, all of it mine. That first night, Vanessa would not leave me alone, and I did not want her to. She made up the spare room, her old room, and she stayed. And she called Derek to tell him she was staying at her mother's house. And I heard her say those words through the wall, my mother's house, in a voice with 11 years of homesickness in it. And that was when I cried for the second time in the whole ordeal. Not from sorrow, lying in my own bed, under my own roof, listening to my daughter be home. In the morning, she made breakfast. She is not the cook I am, but she made eggs and she burned the toast a little, the way she always did at 16. And we sat at the table where her brother had wounded her, and we ate breakfast in the morning light. And it was the most ordinary thing in the world, and it was the whole victory. Not the conference room. This. Eggs and slightly burned toast in a kitchen with the morning sun coming in. The first proper Sunday, she brought Derek to meet me, the kind-faced man from the Christmas photograph. And he turned out to be a high school history teacher with a quiet laugh and a way of really listening when an old woman talks. And he called me Mrs. Whitfield until I told him to call me Eleanor. And then he called me Eleanor. And by the third Sunday, he called me, shyly, Miss Eleanor, which is what he calls me now. We ate in the dining room. We used my mother's china. And at one point in that first Sunday dinner, I looked across the table at my daughter laughing at something Derek said, in the room where she had been told she did not belong. And I thought about how close I had come, my whole life, to letting fear and shame and a son's easy charm keep that chair empty forever. And I made a promise to myself, the second great promise of my life, to match the one I made on the green linoleum floor. I promised I would never again let anyone tell me who was and was not part of my family. I would decide that myself, from now on, by who showed up and who looked and who stayed. Now I promised you I would tell you about the last brick. The quiet thing I did when Vanessa and I set up the trust in 2015. The thing I made you wait for. I am going to tell you now, because it is the thing that turned all of this from a defense into a legacy. And because Marcus did, eventually, hear about it. And I want you to be in the room for that too. When we created the Whitfield Family Trust, I named Vanessa the trustee for my lifetime. But a trust must say what happens after. And here is what mine said. What it has said for 11 years, in language as airtight as my daughter, the certified public accountant, could make it. Upon my death, The trust does not simply pass to my children to be split. I had watched what greed does to siblings over a parent's grave. In all my years keeping other people's books, I have seen families come apart over far less than $2 million. So I built it differently. Upon my death, the house on Lattimore Street and the bulk of the investment account pass into a charitable and family trust, administered by Vanessa. That does two things. It provides for my daughter, who never asked me for a dime and gave me back 11 years she did not owe me. And it funds, in perpetuity, scholarships for young women, the quiet ones, the ones with a head for numbers and no one to tell them they are not poor, to study accounting and finance, so that there will be more women in this world who put $400 in the right place and never, ever have to be told not to worry about the money. I did not wait until my death to start it. That is one of the things being home gave back to me. The chance to see it with my own eyes. Vanessa and I funded the first scholarship that very autumn, out of the income, not the principal, and we named it, after some argument, because I did not want my name on it. I wanted Miss Pearls. So it is the Pearl Award, named for an 84-year-old woman 2 doors down from a room I no longer live in. A woman who never got the chance I got, who told me to go on and break their hearts. The first one went to a girl named Imani, 19 years old, who worked the register at a pharmacy and did her community college accounting homework on her breaks, and who, when Vanessa called to tell her, was so quiet on the line that Vanessa thought the call had dropped. She had not dropped. She was crying too hard to speak. I drove with my daughter to meet that girl and hand her the letter myself. And I looked at her. Quiet, sharp-eyed, watchful. A girl who watched her dollars the way a hawk watches a field. And I saw young Eleanor in a church dress on a marble floor. And I thought, there is the whole point of all of it. Not the conference room. Her. Marcus is in the trust too. I want you to know that, because I do not gloat, and I did not write him out in a fury. Marcus receives a small annual stipend, enough to know he was not forgotten, never enough to take. He cannot touch the house. He cannot touch the principal. He cannot sell, mortgage, or manage $1 of it, ever, for the rest of his life. The boy who tried to take everything because he assumed I had nothing and understood nothing will receive, every year, a modest, dignified reminder that his mother loved him and saw him clearly and protected the family from him at the same time. Those are two different things. At 68, I had finally learned to tell them apart. He found out about all of it eventually. The size of the account, the scholarship trust, the stipend. Mr. Reyes sent him a letter, formal and complete, laying out the structure he had no power to change. I am told, Vanessa heard it from a cousin, that when Marcus read the figure, $2,300,000, the number his poor fragile mother had built from a coffee can while he was calling us poor, he sat down on his front steps and put his head in his hands and stayed there a long time. He did try once to come back to the table. About 4 months after the conference room, he came to the house. He did not call first. He just came on a Saturday afternoon, and he stood on the front walk by the maple, not coming up the steps, holding his hat in his hands like a boy. And I went out onto the porch, but I did not open the gate. And we talked across that little distance, across the front walk where I had stood in the cold March wind, being told it was only temporary. "Mom," he said, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I want to make things right. I want to come to Sunday dinner. I miss you. I miss being a family." And I looked at my son and I waited, the way Vanessa had taught me to wait, the quiet that lets a person fill the silence with the truth they are trying not to say. And he filled it. He could not help it. He said, And I think, once things settle down, we should talk about the trust. Because I don't think it's fair, Mom. The way it's set up, I'm your son. I should have a say in. There it is, I said, gently, not cruelly. You came to talk about the trust. Mom, that's not the only reason. I believe you, I said. I believe it's not the only reason. I believe some part of you really does miss your mother. But you cannot come to my table while you are still trying to get to my money, Marcus. And you have just shown me, standing on my own front walk, that you cannot yet tell the difference between those two things. When you can come up these steps and not say one word about the trust, the house, or the will, not one word, just sit at my table and be my son. That day the door is open. Until that day, it is not. And I went back inside. And I closed my own front door, the same door I had been walked out of in March. And I closed it gently. And I closed it from the inside, which is the whole difference in the world. I am told Tanya left him within the year, the marriage having been built, like the closing, on a floor that was not there. I take no joy in that. I am only telling you, the way the villain's fate is always told, plainly once. He lost the wife, and he lost the house he never owned, and he lost the family table, and he kept a small annual reminder that he had been loved by a woman he never once bothered to look at. That is what happened to Marcus. He has not yet understood that the thing he tried to sell was never the house, and until he does, the door stays where I put it, not locked, never locked, just closed, and waiting for the day he learns to knock without an angle. Vanessa comes on Sundays, in person, at my table with Derek, who turned out to be every bit as kind as his face in the Christmas photograph, and whom I have come to love. We sit in the front parlor where her brother once tried to erase her, and we laugh the way we laughed on the end of that hospital-cornered bed in Cedar Vale, and the burgundy folder sits in the drawer of the side table where I keep it. The deed inside it, with both our names, hers and the trust's, the instrument that brought my daughter home. I started this story by telling you my son never saw whose name was on the deed. Let me tell you what that really means. Because it was never really about property law. Though property law is what saved me, and I thank God for it. And for Vanessa. And for slow old elder lawyers who set a folder down softly and let a foolish man keep being foolish for one more minute. What it means is this. My son spent 41 years deciding who I was without ever looking. He decided I was poor. He decided I was simple. He decided I was fragile and finished and his to manage. And because he decided it instead of looking, he never saw the woman who put $400 in a coffee can in 1988 and held the line for 37 years. He never saw the deed. He never saw his sister's name. He never saw me at all. But the world did in the end. A conference room full of strangers saw it. You have seen it now. And most of all, my daughter saw it, all 11 years of it. On the deed and on the telephone every Sunday. And on the end of that narrow bed. And a person who is truly seen by even one other person is not poor, and is not fragile, and is not finished, no matter what building her son tries to store her in. So here is what I have learned. Your value is not determined by the people who fail to see it. It is determined by what you build in the dark when no one is watching, and by the one or two souls who knew you were building it all along. I built a house and a wall against the cold, and a future for girls I will never meet. And I built it quiet. They never heard a thing. That is the reckoning, not the conference room. The 37 years, If this story touched your heart, then I want to ask you something before you go, and I want you to sit with it, because it is the real reason I told you all of this. Have you ever been counted out by someone you loved, a child, a husband, a sister, only to discover that the quiet thing you built, the thing they never bothered to see, was the very thing that carried you home? Or have you been the one who failed to look and found your way back to someone before it was too late? Betrayal, forgiveness, a second chance. Most families hold at least one of the three. Tell me which one your family holds down in the comments, and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Because I read every single one, and this comment section is a guest book, and I would be honored to have your name in it. And if you would, do an old woman the small kindness of a like and subscribe, so the next person the world tried to count out finds their way to a story that reminds them of the truth. Your value is not determined by the people who fail to see it. I am Eleanor Whitfield. I am 68 years old. My name and my daughter's name are on the deed, and I am home.